everyday woman. Welcome to another episode of the Quiet Ones podcast. I hope that you're having a wonderful day today. This week has really been kind of a challenging week for me, honestly. I've been going through a lot, and there's been a lot that's weighing on my mind. You know, as INFJs, we tend to take on other people's emotions and other people's problems. And I think sometimes we just need a little bit of time to decompress, a little bit of time to ourselves to let go of those things and to release them and to refocus on the things that we really need to focus on. I'm sitting here in my apartment and I'm looking out at the ocean today. It's a gorgeous day outside. It's about 65 degrees, which to me is perfect because I like things a little bit chilly. But the wind is blowing, and the ocean, it looks kind of angry. That's the only way I can think of to describe it. Because the wind is blowing, there's these huge waves, and it's a lot louder than what it usually is. It just seems kind of fitting for what's been going on inside of my head recently. I know that it will pass. Yesterday, it was just a gorgeous day, and the ocean was really calm, and I went for a long walk on the beach, which always helps. Sometimes that's all we need is just to get outside and go for a long walk, and just spend some time releasing all of those things that are weighing us down. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how did you find out that you were an INFJ? And I have a whole bunch of stories that I'm going to read, so I'm super excited about getting to that. Before we get started, I wanted to go over how do you find out that you are an INFJ? What's the process? Because a lot of people ask me that. So what you need to do is go to a website called 16personalities.com. There is a free test on that website that you can take. It only takes about 10 to 15 minutes to take. And they're super easy questions to answer. And I would tell you to make sure that you have a little bit of time to think about the questions and make sure that you are super honest when you answer the questions. It's really easy to fall into the trap of answering the questions of how you think that you should be rather than how you actually are. So make sure that you're as honest as possible with yourself. So then once you take the test, it'll give you your results, which is 4 letters. And then it will give you a description of what those letters mean. So make sure that you read the description, and it will also give you a percentages for what each letter is. So if any of your percentages from the test come up 50-50 or close to that range, then I would strongly encourage you to read the description of both of those personalities. So like my initial test came up INTJ, but the T and the F were 50-50. So I'd strongly encourage you to read both of those so that you can tell which one you actually are. Okay, so let's get to your stories now. These are stories about how people found out that they were INFJs. The first one is from Mary Beth. She says, I've tested on the Myers-Briggs test 3 times as an INFJ. The journey has been and continues to be most important for me. The initial results were a shocker as I believed I was an extrovert. I've learned that this perspective was a result of being the eldest of 7 kids and the need to be a leader in my family. Thank you, Mary Beth, for sharing your story. I am positive that our families influence how our personalities are. And I know as INFJs, sometimes we have to take on different roles or almost different masks in different situations. And sometimes in your family or at work, you may have to take on that role of being an extrovert, of being the leader, and it feels a little bit different as an INFJ. Okay, so the next one comes from Sherry. Sherry says, I took the test years ago and I have no idea what the answer or result was. I took a shortened version recently and it said I was ENFJ, but I knew that wasn't quite right. I am an extroverted introvert. I love people and being around them, but I definitely need time alone to recover. I don't gain energy from being in large groups of people, so I did not believe I was an extrovert. Maybe when I was a teenager I gained energy that way. But now I have no doubt that I need the alone time to recover. I am everyone's natural counselor. I hear things from people I really do not want to, but I feel I need to be there for them, and the traits of an INFJ just resonate with me on a deep level. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Sherry. I love your story because I wanted to bring up something that maybe not everybody knows about. You can be an extrovert and an introvert at the same time. It's called an ambivert. It's like when you fall 50-50 in between extrovert and introvert. There are some people who are both, who like to be around people and are energized by being around people, but also who need alone time and who are energized by alone time. Sometimes it happens too at different points in our lives where people who are in that position are more introverted at certain times, but then more extroverted at certain times. It doesn't make you strange or anything. There's a lot of people that are like that, actually. My niece is like that, too. So the next story comes from Andrea. And Andrea says, I took the test and got INFP, but the P and the J were almost 50-50. But after reading about it, I was very obviously INFJ. Thank you, Andrea, for your story. I know that there are a lot of people who fall into this category, and that's why I definitely encourage you to research both of the personality types that come up on your test if you get anything close to 50-50. The next one comes from Karen. Karen says, a friend asked me if I was an INFJ due to my empathy and introverted ways. I said, I don't know. So she said, I'm sure you are, and suggested I take the test. I'm so thankful for finding out. I don't feel as crazy as I thought I was. My life and past paints a much clearer picture now. Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing. I know that was one of the biggest things for me when I took the test. I was so excited not to feel like I was so different or so crazy anymore. I knew why I was the way that I was, and it makes such a huge difference, honestly. The next one is from Cassie. Cassie says, I have taken several personality tests and nothing was quite accurate. A good friend of mine sent me a link for INFJ and I read it and felt like they were talking about my soul. Thank you, Cassie, for sharing. I think sometimes that's how it happens too. You read about something and you really resonate with every single thing that it says, which is just also completely amazing. It really does honestly make such a difference when you're reading all of the descriptions and you think, how do these people know this? How do they know so much stuff about me? It's pretty amazing. The next one comes from Shannon, and Shannon says, my boss at work had everyone take the 16 personalities test. I tested ISFJ and it was about 50-50 between the S and the N. My boss looked at me and said, nope, it's close, but try again. I was my mom's caregiver at the time, and my life was super hectic. I had to prioritize others' needs above my own, which is why the S was 50-50 with the N. I retook it and got INFJ, and have gotten that answer consistently from other tests as well. I always thought it was funny that my boss knew me better than I knew myself. Thanks, Shannon, for sharing. It is pretty funny that your boss knew you better, but I'm glad that your boss did. And like I said before, I think that certain things in our lives can have an effect on how we answer the questions. Maybe not necessarily have an effect on our personalities, because like we spoke about before, INFJs have that tendency to put on different masks in different situations in our lives. But I definitely think that it can influence us in how we answer the questions at certain times for those tests. The next one comes from Karina, and she says, I did the test about 20 years ago at work. And I just looked at the result and put it away. There wasn't the information back then that there is now. Now I look at the description of an INFJ and it's like reading a biography of me. All the things that I thought made me broken were just actually a part of who I was. It was and still is a mind-blowing revelation for me. I wish I'd understood this when I was younger. I wouldn't have been so hard on myself all these years. Thank you, Karina, for sharing. I'm so glad that you had this revelation. It is amazing to know these things, and I think it does really help us a lot to not be so hard on ourselves, to have more patience with ourselves, and the more understanding that you have, the more you can release some of those expectations that other people have put on you. And the more that you can really come to accept yourself rather than trying to change those things that other people have told you are wrong. The next one comes from Rosie. She says, "Finding out I was an introvert changed my life. I was a painfully shy kid, and my mother forced me into so many extroverted activities, so I didn't miss out on life. I thought that's how you were supposed to be. Like Karina Lister said, I wish I had known all this when I was younger, as I wouldn't have been so hard on myself." Thank you, Rosie, for sharing. I agree 100,000%, honestly. I really wish that I would have understood what an introvert was a long time ago as well, because I did the same thing. I've spent my whole life with people telling me, you need to be more extroverted, you need to have more friends, you need to get out of the house, that's the problem that you have. But it's not a problem though. Being an introvert is not a problem. It doesn't make you wrong. It's just the way that you are. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't need to get out of the house every once in a while. You certainly do. It's just that you don't have to live the life of somebody who's extroverted. We can find our joy doing a lot different things than what people who are extroverted do. And that's 100% okay. The next one comes from Michelle. She says, "Finding out I am an INFJ was the most significant and eye-opening realization. I finally had some understanding into my personality and why I did certain things. I'm less harsh on myself now, as I know it's just me, and I'm far more accepting of myself." Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing. I absolutely adore what you said. I think I'm in the same place too. Now that I have this understanding of who I am, of what my personality is, I'm so much more accepting of myself. And you guys, it really does make a difference. I know I've said it quite a bit in this episode already, but it's so true. I promise you, it's very true. The next one is from Brittany, and she said, "I was on YouTube and it was just playing while I was doing laundry. It says, see if you are the rarest personality type. I'm like, well, I'm probably not the rarest. And everything it said described me. I'm like, how did they know? I took an online test and I tested INFP. Only took a couple of videos to realize it's definitely not me, and I'm definitely INFJ. Ever since, I've been addicted to learning about it. I think it's helped me to realize why I procrastinate and how to understand my weaknesses and play to my strengths. Now I want to learn all the personality types so that I can better interact with others. I was also able to find out my brother is ISFP. I think that is a good match for us." Thank you, Brittany, for sharing. I know exactly what you mean as far as wanting to know other people's personality types. That is something that I'm kind of obsessed with too, especially when they're important to me. I really like to know what type that they have so that I know the best way to interact with them. And for most people, it's really pretty easy to type them. The only people that I've had problems typing are my parents. And I don't know why, honestly. I can type anybody else. I was just on the phone with my niece a couple of days ago, and I was helping her type her stepsister and her stepmom and her dad, and we're going through all these things about why these people in her life are acting the way that they are, and I'm helping her to understand her personality type. So it is really, really helpful, especially when you come into a situation where there's some kind of conflict or you can't quite figure out how best to communicate with somebody. It's really, really helpful to know their personality type, to know how they process information, and to know how they're going to communicate with you as well. Especially when you're talking about somebody like an INFJ, we're usually pretty direct in how we communicate. But if you're talking to somebody who isn't very direct, but you're expecting them to be direct, then, you can get into a lot of conflict there. I've had that conflict so many times. I can't even begin to tell you. Some people in my family aren't very direct, and they like to call me out when I am direct. Like, oh, that's wrong that you're so direct in your communication. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's wrong 100% of the time. I know that there are some times when I could probably tone it down a little bit, and that's something that I'm definitely working on. But like I said, it's helpful to know the personality types of the people that you're communicating with, so that you can meet them on their level, because sometimes that's the best way to go. Okay, so the next one is from Kaya. And she says, last year when I was still only a friend with my boyfriend, he told me that I was for sure the advocate counselor. I was like, what are you talking about? And then he told me about the different personality types and the test. Then I forgot about it until January 2019. Then I asked him again about the name of the test, and I took the test then. I came up as INFJ. When I read the results on the internet, I cried. For the first time, I really felt like someone understood me and that I was not alone. But I still did the test like 3 times, every time came up INFJ. Because I don't think or believe in myself that I am that special. Still fabulous, of course. The great contradictions of an INFJ. From that time, I am reading about this stuff and trying to be better and to better understand myself. Thank you so much for sending your story. I know exactly what you mean. When I realized that I had the rarest personality type, I was like, no, that's not it. That can't be me. I'm not that special. But then it's like that constant contradiction, right? Because sometimes we feel like we know so much that we have so much confidence, but then in other parts, there's like no confidence at all, which is really interesting to deal with sometimes, honestly. The next one comes from Anna. I took the MBTI test at work, and since then I've taken it several times. I always got INFJ. Actually, it boosted my confidence to learn about those great leaders who were also INFJ. I feel like I love all sides of myself now. There's nothing wrong with me or who I am. I feel like it's my superpower being an INFJ. Anna, I love that. It does feel like a superpower being an INFJ. I totally agree with you there. The next one is from Olivia, and she says, I discovered the test through my narcissistic ex-fiancé. He said he had done this personality type at work. He apparently was a rare personality type. But then I got INFJ, which is rarer, and I think he got jealous. Olivia, thank you so much for sending that. I'm so glad that you got away from him. And I'm also glad that he introduced you to the personality test. That's completely awesome. The next one is from Jeannie, and she says, my aunt gave me a book for high school students heading into college. It was all based on the MBTI and guiding you through picking a major and following your path as an adult. I also had to take the test when I entered college. I think part of the reason was to pair you with a roommate. As a freshman, they gave me the much coveted single. I got the INFJ result both of those times. I've taken it a few times since, always the same. I have gone in and out of phases where I kind of get obsessed. I've picked it back up in the last few months, and I'm going through some big shifts in my life. I'm finding it to be so helpful once again. Jeannie, thank you so much for sharing. I know that it's really helpful to know about your personality type when you're going through big shifts in your life. That was really when I found the test, honestly, when I was going through a really hard time in my life. I know that it's really helpful every time you're going through something big in your life. So the next one comes from Linda, and Linda says, I became a young single mom before I even started college, which changed everything, and I was lost. I wanted to be a sports journalist, but it was clear that wasn't going to work out. I took a personality growth class, and amid all of the turmoil happening at home, my professor took me under her wing for the summer. This eventually led to a psych professor mentoring me. She guided me in trying to rediscover myself, which landed me on our campus career assessments. I learned about the MBTI. I didn't always express myself as an INFJ, but as I've done my own healing and settled into who I really am, I've embraced it. I reassess every so often because, like all other things, I change. I've been an INFJ for the past 6 years and have come to understand myself better than ever before. Thank you so much, Linda, for sharing. It seems like a lot of us have found our personality types amid turmoil in our lives. But I think it's helpful at the same time because it really helps you to understand some of the things that you're going through and why you feel the way that you do about those things. And for me, certainly, it helped me to get through those things and to have a better perspective as well. The next one is from Lulu, and Lulu says, "It started a few years ago when I was browsing on StumbleUpon. I came across a personality test. It wasn't the MBTI, but something similar. I took it a few times and I got a couple of different results. But the biggest thing is that it really opened the door to introspection and self-awareness for me in a huge way. I started thinking a lot about my own personality, how people see me, how I see myself, how I behave in certain situations, all of which are things I hadn't explored too much before. I got really interested in personality tests because I really enjoyed thinking about my personality and I kept learning new things about myself, just by reflecting on my own, so I started taking a lot of different tests, which ultimately led to the MBTI. The first time I ever took the MBTI test, I got INTJ, just like you. I didn't think too much about it at the time, since I barely knew anything about the MBTI, but I thought the description of the INTJ was pretty accurate of myself, and I thought it was interesting to see so many things written out about myself as I had never before noticed blatantly. However, as I started reading more and more about the MBTI test, I became deeply interested in it, and I ended up taking the test a few more times. Each time I became even more careful and brutally honest with myself than the last time when answering the questions. Every single time afterwards, I got INFJ consistently. By this time, since I was so interested in the whole MBTI thing, I started reading more in depth about the INFJ personality. I read that it was the rarest of all personality types, and I thought it was strange because I couldn't imagine that my personality was so rare. I thought that maybe I didn't answer the questions accurately, or that the test wasn't accurate. I wanted to be sure that it was the correct result, so I read huge amounts of articles about INFJs. The more I read, the more amazed I was, because it felt like I was reading my own life story, or that whoever wrote the articles must have hacked into my head. At one point, I found an online forum where INFJs shared their experiences. That's what completely convinced me. This particular forum was extremely long, hundreds and hundreds of INFJs everywhere talking about what it was like being them, sharing their stories. In their own words, describing what was going on in their heads. It was a very odd but sublimely awakening experience. There were things that people shared that I never knew that I related to until someone put it into words and I saw that it made complete sense. There were things there that I never knew people other than me didn't experience, things that I grew up thinking were completely normal, things that everyone shared. I learned that I'm not alone in this world, that there really are other people like me. I thought it was amazing. Learning about MBTI and my personality completely changed my life and helped me understand who I am and who I want to be, and also understand other people in the process. Overall, life is a lot less frustrating for me, knowing certain things about myself and about others, because I've accepted the things that I can't change, and I can more easily pinpoint what actions I need to take to correct certain things. The biggest thing for me was that I wasn't discovering who I am. I was just recognizing consciously who I've always been, becoming aware of it all and understanding it in depth. I always knew that I had an intrinsic love for understanding other people and their desires and behaviors, and a deeply sensitive care for others. And now I just understand why I am the way that I am, and that many others are the same. Lulu, thank you so much for sharing your story. I absolutely love your whole story. I love everything that you wrote there. I couldn't have said it better myself, honestly. It really is a life-changing experience. It's something completely amazing. And I love the part where you said that you weren't discovering who you are, but that you're just recognizing it, that you always knew it, but now it's just something that's at the front of your mind, that you're more aware of, and that you have a more in-depth understanding of. That is completely amazing, and thank you so much for sharing again. The reason that I wanted to share all of these stories with you is that I want to make sure that you know that not everybody's experience is just taking the test and getting your 4 letters and then saying, oh, okay, this is exactly what it is. Now I understand who I am. Some people have a lot different experience. For some people, it's more of a journey than just a one-time thing that they automatically know. So I wanted to tell you my story as well. I first learned about the Myers-Briggs test when I was in college. I took the test because it was a requirement for one of the classes that I was taking. And when I took the test, it came up INFJ. And the X means that the T and the J are 50-50. And I read what the description was of both of them. And I thought, oh, okay, that's cool. And then I threw it in a box because I was busy with so much stuff in college. And I just really didn't have time to even worry about it back then. But then a few years later, I was going through a really rough time. I was working in a job that I absolutely loved, but the boss that I had was completely terrible. He was a total narcissistic guy. And I was really going through a rough time because at the time I didn't really understand what that meant. And I didn't understand what was happening with me and what the effect of his personality had on me. I just knew that I really was going through a hard time, and I ended up being diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And after that happened, I just started searching. I wanted some answers. I wanted to know why that happens and what's the best thing that you can do to get through it. And all of that led me back to the personality test. So I took the test again, and it came up INTJ. When I was taking the test, I firmly believed that I was answering the questions in the way that I wanted to be and not the way that I actually am. Which is why I always encourage people, when you're taking the test, make sure that you're honest. Make sure that you're completely honest with yourself about the way that you actually are. So several years after that, I was talking to my niece, who was only 13 years old at the time, and she got really excited about the test as well. She tested INTP. We spent a lot of time, and we still spend a lot of time actually, talking about our personalities and thinking about why we do the things that we do and talking about other people's personalities and trying to understand our interactions with other people. We were having one of these conversations one afternoon. I think that she had gotten into some kind of an argument with her grandma, and I was trying to explain to her what had happened and, telling her, well, you hurt your grandma's feelings and that's why she's responding this way, and here's what you need to do to fix it, and here's how you can make a better decision in the future. And she looked at me and she goes, you spend a lot of times talking about feelings. Like, you think about feelings a lot. And I was like, well, yeah, feelings are important. And she goes, well, I don't think that you're an INTJ. I think that you're an INFJ. And I'm like, why would you say that? Like, don't say that kind of thing to me. And she's like, no, I really think that you are. You really talk about feelings a lot, and you're always concerned about people's feelings, and you're always more concerned about other people than you are about yourself. And she starts going through comparing the way that she thinks about things, because she has a T personality, more thinking, and comparing the way that I think about things, and my personality, quite obviously now, is feeling. It really caught me off guard, first of all, because here she's 13 years old and she knows more about my personality than I did at the time. Which was kind of frightening, but it was also an awakening experience for me too, because I really put some more thought into the way that I answered the questions on the test. And I did a lot more research about what the difference was between an INTJ and an INFJ. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, yeah, it's definitely true. I definitely am more of a feeling type of person. And I think the reason that I was so concerned as well about having a feeling personality type was, when I think feeling personality type, I think somebody who's like extremely emotional all the time. Someone who is extremely outwardly emotional. people who get angry and hysterical, and people who cry in front of other people, and people who are really moody. That's what I had associated with feeling personality type. But the more that I learned about INFJs, the more I learned that not everybody with a feeling personality type is like that outwardly. We can still be stoic on the outside, but on the inside, our feelings are incredibly deep. At the same time, there's something that is incredibly important to us and incredibly personal. So we don't go around sharing them with everybody. We really only share them with people who are very important to us and who we know for sure won't hurt us with them. I think that's even more true for those of us who have been in some form of a narcissistic relationship. And that would apply to not only boyfriends, husbands, girlfriends, but also work-related relationships or friendships, or even if a member of your family is narcissistic. That can be something that definitely has a major effect on how you express your emotions and how comfortable you are sharing them with other people. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to talk about is another segment that we do called Ask Sarah. And this question comes from Kaylee. Kaylee says, I can barely get a word out when I'm emotional, and it's been getting worse. I'm in a toxic relationship, and I can't be the one to leave for some reason. I don't know how to help myself or him because I can't verbalize how I feel. How do I let go and express how he made me feel and that it's reasonable because these are my feelings? Also, how do you know if you were an INFJ? Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is how you know that you're an INFJ. So like we talked about at the beginning of the show, there's a website that you can go to. It's called 16personalities.com, and you can take a free test. It only takes about 10 minutes, and Kaylee, I think that it will be really, really helpful for you. So make sure that you read the description when it gives you the results, regardless of what it is. It will give you all kinds of insights about your life. Now, being in a toxic relationship is incredibly difficult. I would really encourage you to take an inventory of what you're getting from this relationship, and also think about what the relationship is taking from you. I know it's difficult to talk about your feelings. Believe me, I know how difficult that is. But you really shouldn't be in a relationship with someone that you don't feel safe enough to communicate your feelings with. You also shouldn't have to validate that your feelings are reasonable. Sometimes the best thing that you can do in a relationship like that is to step away, even if it's just for a little while. See what your life would be like outside of that situation. No one deserves to spend their life being miserable or in a situation like that. Absolutely no one. I can also promise you that you're strong enough to make a change. You can get out and you can do something different. There is someone out there who will love you the way that you are and the way that you should be loved. I'm absolutely sure of it. Thank you, Kaylee, for sending in your question. If you guys have any questions, please send them my way. You can send them to podcast@infjwoman.com. So that's it. That's all we have for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already. You can listen to this show on Apple Podcasts, on Google Play, on Spotify, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. And if there's anywhere else that you want to listen to it, please let me know. I will try my best to get it on as many platforms as there are available. Oh, you can also listen on YouTube too. Make sure that you follow us, facebook.com/thequietonespodcast, and also INFJ Woman, which is on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as well. Make sure you go subscribe to YouTube. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys next week.